Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to Couch Conversations with the Doctors. What night is it tonight? It is Monday night, and it is time for Couch Conversations with the Doctors. As always, we're going to go around introducing our esteemed panelists who are here with us, starting with our colleague who has the fun in the sun. Don't know how that weather is looking right now. Doug, what's going on?
We got a week of rain in this neighborhood, so I'm not going to have too much fun, and I'm not going to be out in the sun. I'd like to welcome everyone for joining tonight. I'm a retired physician. I worked in the western suburbs of Chicago for 30 years, and then spent 2 years in a congressman's office. And it really opened my eyes to public service and to public health. It's a real honor to be here, and we're going to try and answer your questions as best we can.
All right. Awesome. I'm having a little technical difficulty here. I think I'm being delayed for a second. Back with that doctor who's known as Dr. 100 on the streets for keeping it real all the time. That's our very own Dr. Maya Green. Dr. Green.
Good evening, community. Good evening to Congressman Davis, Nikki. Thank you all for putting this together. I love this spot that we stay in because this is a spot where we can learn with, learn from, and fellowship with community. So I always enjoy the talks. Happy to be here. Excited for this nice topic.
Outstanding, outstanding. To that connoisseur of art, who is an all-around great guy in public health. That's our very own Joe Harrington. Joe?
Thank you, Nikki, and thank you, Congressman Davis, for providing this platform. And I want to welcome everyone that's joined this evening and hope you learned something from it. I spent most of my career in public health and healthcare, worked at 3 hospitals, retired in 2017 from the Illinois Department of Public Health, where I was the regional health officer for Cook County and an administrative law judge, and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so very much to the man who makes it possible for us each and every Monday night to share the real wealth with our community, the one who teaches us that your true wealth is your health, our very own Congressman of the Illinois 7th Congressional District, Congressman Danny K. Davis. Congressman?
Well, let me thank all of you for being a part of the discussion that we have, not only tonight, but that we have each Monday. I think all of us learn so much until we never learn enough. But I think also the way that we solve problems in this country is kind of laying them out, looking at what they are, and then deciding what can be done about them and how do we do something. Health, I think, is so vitally important until it's hard to describe just how important. Because if you really look at it, you can have everything else that there is available. But if you don't have your health, you don't feel fulfilled because you can't enjoy all of the rest of whatever it is that there is. If you like to read and you don't have your health, you don't feel like reading. You might not even be able to see in order to read. So welcome everybody. Thank you very much. And let's get it on a Monday night.
You're muted. You're muted. Nikki, we can't hear you.
Well, okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Maya. Thanks for that backup. Thank you so much. Well, Tony, we see that you've joined us. Why don't you give us a brief introduction really quickly so we can get started with the conversation?
Happy to be here with you guys as usual. Dr. Hampton here, doctor who specializes in family practice and obesity medicine. Happy to be here. Always a pleasure to be here to answer questions and to just interact with the community. So thank you, Nikki, for the opportunity. And of course, Congressman Davis.
No worries. So starting with Connie Taylor. Connie Taylor says, good evening to everyone. Linda Johnson is here. And she says, good evening to everyone. Nikki, can you check your, well, actually, Linda, I did check my messages for you. I got your message. I got the picture of the card, but I want to have a little chit chat with you. Is there any way possible you can give me a call in the office on tomorrow? So yes, Linda Johnson, I got your message. I got the card. I want to reach out to that person, but I want to talk to you really briefly before I give them a call. So give me a call in the office on tomorrow. The number is 773 533 7520. Once again, that number is 773 533 7520. All right, I see that you got it, and thank you so very much. Well, tonight we've had a plethora of people to write in and ask, what is inflammation? How does it get into our body, and where does it actually come from? Well, guys, attack that, and we'll go from there. Inflammation. Interesting.
So, Nikki, it's a
Maya?
very,
Honey?
very,
Oh, go ahead, Doug. Go right
it's
ahead.
a very, very interesting question. And I think it's your body's way of defending you. You know, in our country, we have an army, a navy, and an air force. And your body's system has a defense system to recognize and defend against intruders. Some of it is actually in the surface. Some of it is by circulating different kinds of cells in the bloodstream. And some of it is actually in the tissues. And all of these things either react and say, this is foreign, and send out signals to other parts of the body, or they begin to defend against the invader or the thing that doesn't belong there, the thing that isn't naturally part of your body. And they try and get rid of it. And part of getting rid of it is the release of chemicals. And those chemicals are the things that cause fever, sweats, fatigue, and heat. So inflammation is your body's response to an injury, an illness, a foreign invader. And it's a very, very highly evolved and intricate system that's an evolution over 2 million years.
Yeah, I want to chime in and just give a very simple explanation. If you were to trip and fall and twist your ankle, inflammation would occur. Your ankle would swell up. That's your body's reaction to what happened. It's letting you know that something is wrong, is down in your ankle, and you need to do something. And the greater the pain is telling you, you need to do something right away.
Right. I'll add that inflammation is definitely like a 911 phone call, and it's your body saying there's an emergency, and thankfully that occurs, as was echoed. However, short-term emergencies are fine, and we need that so that if we're trying to recover from an injury, to heal from a cut or a sprain, we want that inflammation. What we don't want is what we see in our community is that chronic long-term inflammation. That's when it becomes harmful. And most people don't realize that diabetes causes chronic inflammation. People who have dementia have inflammation in their brain, so they are inflamed and the blood vessels are damaged. People who have heart disease have inflammation in their arteries around the heart. So inflammation is really something that is even worse if it's chronic. And I'm always thinking about this because I'm always trying to figure out, well, what's the root cause? And mostly it's the food we put in our mouths, like ultra processed foods. They cause inflammation. So if you eat something out of a box, it's highly likely that it's highly processed. And because it's highly processed, it's going to cause damage. Excess sugar, excess carbs can cause inflammation. And if you continue to expose yourself to those things, your body can't handle that excess sugar and carbs that leads to glycation, which is when the glucose sticks to the arteries and the nerves and cause damage. Obviously, if you're in a stressed environment constantly, whether it's coming from your boss or from a bad interaction from your spouse and or your kids, that's going to cause stress, that'll cause inflammation. If you don't get enough sleep, you're going to have inflammation, because if you don't get enough sleep, that is a stressor to your body. And if you live in an environmental toxic environment, and sometimes when I drive through Oak Brook, which is near my home, I don't see a lot of factories fuming out things into the air. I don't see that in Oak Brook. So those people are not exposed to toxins and pollutants that can harm them. And they also uh, tend to do things that people in unsafe neighborhoods can't do, like take a nice walk with the baby or take a nice jog. So if you're not moving around, that can then indirectly create an environment where you're inflamed, because if you don't move your body, it's going to be inflamed. So it's a lot of ways to look at inflammation, but the key is that we need to think about the things I just mentioned and come up with solutions. And again, your fork is the main one. So we need to eat real food. We can't spend a lot of time in the processed food section of the grocery store. And nowadays, it's with the air fryers and things like that. It's much easier to come home, even if you haven't prepared the chicken wings. They're still frozen. You can throw them in some water, thaw them out, and throw them in the air fryer, as opposed to going and getting in the Popeyes line for 20 minutes, because on Tuesday they got the special, or whatever day that is. So we have to think about it that way. And if we do that, then we can have a less inflamed body, a body that's more likely to thrive.
So inflammation is all around us in terms of causation, and I guess it also gives us signals that you need to do something, or you better do something. Yeah, it reminds me of a poem a lady used to say all the time, that when something is wrong, you better say something, or you better do something, or you better change something. And I guess that's what inflammation is really telling us.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. One of the things, and I was going to save this for the end. I live across the street from a park, and um, I hadn't been out all day because I was doing things, and I said I'm going to go for a walk in the park. And what was really interesting is, because of the weather, there were a lot of people in the park, mostly mothers with young children, and it was amazing just to see people out and moving. I mean, that's where life is supposed to be. There was no noise. You just heard children playing, heard the wind in the park, and that's how life is supposed to be. So
Right.
so we're doing things and living in environments that are not consistent with health, and that's why we find these problems occurring, because there's certain environments and in certain neighborhoods, as the summer approaches, I mean, people get concerned about how safe it is to go out and be in the park and spend time in the park. So while they're not direct causes of inflammation, they may in some cases contributed to it, because people don't want to take those risks. So it's easy to tell people to go out for, go out and take a brisk walk and do something like that. But you also have to know whether or not the person you're talking to lives in a community where that's possible. But since I do, I took full advantage of it today. And there have been some incidents in the park, and there have been some shootings in that park as well. But
Mhm.
today was a day that I saw life the way it's supposed to be. And I
Mhm.
think that's part of what Dr. Hampton is talking about, is there's certain things that we're supposed to do to keep ourselves healthy. And diet is a major contributing factor to chronic conditions. And if we eat a healthy diet, it's less likely that we will develop a chronic condition. It's also true that if we eat a healthy diet and move more, it's probably more likely that we won't gain the weight that many of us gain, and,
Mhm.
and we'll live a longer time. So there are a lot of things that everybody can do in their daily lives to live a healthier, longer, more productive life.
I definitely agree with what everyone has said. Dr. Graham, I usually explain immune systems the same way you did. Army, Navy, Coast Guard, because they're different groups of cells in the autoimmune. In the immune system, and we think of them as an overarching kind of military for our bodies, right?
Mhm.
And for instance, you have your T cells that are going to protect against viruses, cancers, things like that. You have your neutrophils getting the bacteria. So if you ever wonder how, for a lot of exams you take that are screening, we see what type of department in your body's military is elevated. That's how we can say, oh, you have a viral infection. Oh, you have a parasite. Those are eosinophils. Oh, you got and then you got, just like you got the Marines that come up and boom, 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 everything. You got your monocytes. They'll come up here, just eat everything, clear off the field. Let's do that, right? And so a lot of that, what the doctors have talked about, are the body trying to defend itself. But what's the course of that? Let's not forget autoimmune. There's certain conditions where the body just thinks, hey, it maybe get its wires crossed. It could be part of diet. Sometimes it's part of genetics. There's somehow miscommunication, and the body says, hey, guess what, thyroid? You're foreign to me. I don't know you. I got to check you out, see what it is. And you have thyroiditis. Sometimes your body will say, hey, to your joints. Guess what, joints? You're foreign to me. I don't cartilage, the cushioning. I don't know you. What is this? I'm going to check it out. That's arthritis. So a lot of times if you hear something called itis, something that ends in itis, I-T-I-S, that stands for inflammation. So when you're reading your medical reports and things like that, and you see itis, that's the code word that we use code tag on that we use for inflammation. Hepatitis, pancreatitis, thyroiditis, arthritis, myocarditis, that's the muscle in your heart, inflamed, right? And so autoimmune, if you think about it, any disease that, if you're in any inflammatory stage, that's why it's good to get your checkups. You want to bring it under control as much as possible, because you want your military, your body's soldiers, you want them to rest when they can, come out, do what they need to do, go home to their family and children. You don't want them all out here just to everything. You want to calm it down, because you don't want them to start attacking everybody. I don't know if y'all saw this movie. It was called Pulp Fiction, and they gave this person a firearm. They kept saying, and he finally said, don't give me one, because you know what I'm gonna do. Just all over the place. You want to calm it down, because if inflammation is allowed to continue, it will just impact everything. Your heart, your eyes, your liver, all of it. As a matter of fact, we had a conversation maybe a couple of years ago about blood vessels and when they heal, and sometimes when people get cholesterol plaques and things like that, not getting enough sleep can put you at risk for inflammation. Why? Because your blood vessels actually heal from the inflammation that they experience and the stress while you sleep. So those are ways you can do that. Okay. So we talked about the military. We talked about why this conversation is important, how we don't want to get from acute, somebody mentioned inflammation that happens now, to chronic long-term inflammation. And if you have a chronic inflammatory condition, you want to bring it under control as soon as possible, right? So we talked about those things. I think Dr. Hampton went into kind of what we can do. The anti-inflammatory foods, move your body around, get enough sleep. We talked about that, right? You mentioned managing stress, and have a place where you can land your mental, your spiritual, your social stressors, whether it be a therapist, or whether you have a system of worship that brings things to calm for you, whether you practice mindfulness and just being self-aware, but have an active plan, because somebody already said, I think Congressman Davis said, inflammation is all around us. So you do have to have an outlet where you calm that body down, right? The military is good, but only good when it's time for it's time to take care of stuff. Besides then, we want you to go home, be with your family, watch Lilo and Stitch, all that other stuff, and be cool. We need you to be cool, right? All right. I think that's unless y'all got. I think that's all I want
I'll
to say
add
about.
one more thing real quick, which is I had a friend who ironically had a name of the military, Major. And I was visiting. This is probably during my college years. So I came back to visit, and neighborhood on the west side. And during that visit, I heard the police sirens at least twice, maybe 3 times. I also heard a gunshot, which I thought was firecrackers, and they said, "Oh, they're probably just shooting again." And so, what I don't want people to do, even if you're in this environment, don't normalize what's not normal. I do not hear gunshots in my neighborhood. I rarely hear the police sirens in my neighborhood. Periodically, you'll hear an ambulance because we have a nursing home near my home. That's more normal. And the other part we don't want to normalize is the inflammation in our joints. We think it's normal because we're getting old. But we have people like Ernestine Shepherd, the bodybuilder, who has proven to us that even at a later age, she's probably 86 now. And all the guys on this live stream would notice her if she walked by at 86. Not as an old lady, but as somebody that's looking pretty good for an 86-year-old. We also sometimes go into the barbershop and we see a dark patch on the neck of a fellow barber. Someone's at the barbershop. That dark patch, acanthosis nigricans, is an outward reflection of inflammation. We also, in the same, maybe at the beauty shop, you see a person with a lot of skin tags on their skin. That person is outwardly reflecting inflammation. We know that certain conditions, even I hate to go there, but if you're not at your ideal body weight, fat cells cause inflammation. But we don't want to normalize what's not normal. And I'm not talking about obesity, because I'm an obesity doctor and I never would shame a person. What I'm saying is I want that person to understand that there is a way to achieve a more ideal state to reduce inflammation so that your body can thrive. And that does not mean you have to be skinny. It just means that if you check things in your labs, like a C-reactive protein, a set rate, you can check a uric acid, bilirubin, all these what we call inflammatory markers of insulin level. If they're high, you may find that when you make these lifestyle changes, those things start to settle down. Because because those outward reflections, I had a patient just today. Why do I keep getting essentially what was jock itch? And that person had a blood sugar A1C that was about 12.
Ooh.
So the reason why they're getting a jock itch is because their sugars are out of control, and that yeast loves that extra sugar. That's also causing inflammation. Oh, doc, why do I keep getting this nail fungus? Same thing. So why do I keep getting a rash under my belly? Same thing. So the good news about those things, though, I love, is that they give you a little bit of a warning. They're not the heart attack. They're not the stroke. They're not the early cognitive decline. They're outward reflections of inflammation. So when people see that, they can say, okay, maybe it's time for me to act, because I have a warning that if the inflammation is affecting my skin, maybe it's affecting my arteries and my nerves as well, which are all over my body. So as a doctor, it's difficult to be at the barbershop and not say anything. I want to go up to these people and say, hey, I can help you. I can show you another way and these are not, I'm not talking about like an older person. I'm talking about a 20-year-old with a rash on their neck. That's acanthosis nigricans, that dark rash. And I know what it means. I know that they're probably diabetic or borderline. And I know ultimately where it's going to lead. And the good news is that all of these things can be fixed with lifestyle. There is no, one of the comments, and I'll just go ahead and address it. Nellie Parnell King, right? She has a comment. Does that mean I need to take meloxicam? My doctor's prescribed, even though it may cause other side effects. So meloxicam is a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory like ibuprofen and Aleve. And the answer is, in a fire, when there's a 911 emergency, it's probably okay to use a medicine to calm the fire. But the question is, why do I have a fire in the first place? And using the medication as bridge therapy to help us in those moments is very helpful. But because of what she said in the question, they have side effects. What you don't want to do is spend the rest of your life depending on meloxicam or any other anti-inflammatory as the only solution. There are people who, well, with lifestyle changes can either not take it at all or take much less. And that's the path we want people to go on, a path of restoration, hope, and healing, not relying on pharmaceuticals as the answer, because they have a ton of side effects. As you know, anti-inflammatories greatly increase your risk for kidney problems. So, and not to mention your gastrointestinal system may not tolerate it. Your risk for ulcers is higher. So it's okay to use things in moderation, but we got to get to why there's inflammation, which is why we love having these conversations. And if you're struggling with your sleep, let's fix that. If you're in a very stressful job, start looking for another job if you can't fix it. If you are not eating well because my kids only eat McDonald's, they need to stop eating McDonald's because you're the parent and you're going to start feeding them real food, right? So you have to make those kind of decisions so that you can better control your destiny. And because the reality is, when you make these changes, it'll then empower you to know that I can do things that are difficult. And therefore, as more difficult things come in your life, you'll be able to handle them. So I try to encourage my patients. I get a little preachy, as you can tell, but I try to encourage them to know that they control their destiny.
Now, I don't know if that's,
Two things. One, you made me think of an experience I had, and this is years ago. And I was in the canteen. I was working at the University of Illinois in Wood Street location. And those of you who've been there know on the first floor there's a canteen. That's where people go get their snacks and get something to eat or drink. And I happened to be in there one day, and a woman came in with three kids, and they were probably all under the age of maybe 8 years old, and let them loose in the store. And I was disturbed because they were running around. And then she went up to the counter and she was ready to pay for the items that they picked up. And I think the total cost was like $20 or $25 for what they picked up as just potato chips, popcorn, candy, things of that nature. And she said something I'll never forget. If I had known I was going to spend this much money, I would have bought you some real food. I was thinking, I don't even know. I didn't, at the time I heard that, I said, I don't even if you know what real food is.
Right.
Because if you're taking the McDonald's and you're considering that real food, that's not real food either.
Right.
The
That's
only thing that would constitute real food, if you bought the food and you cooked the food, then you would know that it's real food. But if you go somewhere, even if it's a high-end restaurant, you don't know what they're doing to the food. It may appear to be, but when Dr. Hampton's talking about, he's talking about taking the time to maybe prepare some food, even a quick salad or something like that, things that you can do that are really pretty simple. But the other point that I wanted to make, and I'm going to let the doctors, the real doctors, talk about this. You talked about labs. Everybody who goes to a doctor gets a blood pressure, and typically they get lab blood drawn, and that blood is drawn to get labs. And if Dr. Hampton, Dr. Graham, Dr. Meyer, they want to talk about what's in the lab report that they should look at, because a lot of people have access to these reports now, but they never look at them. They've never seen them. Years ago, when Dr. Mason and I used to do a major health event for men, one of the things we would do, we would send them their lab reports. And they'd say, I'd never seen this before. And then we'd have to help them interpret. So could you talk about the lab report, particularly around some of the things you're talking about, because you'll know what your blood sugar is. You'll know what your cholesterol is. And so if you have access to your record, you could go in and you could do some things to really get a better idea of what your health is like.
I think you start with what's already being done by almost every doctor. And so obviously, if you do a CBC, you may notice that, if your immune system is overreacting, you will see in your CBC your white count, and other factors like your neutrophils and lymphocytes. You can look at those as a sign that there's maybe some inflammation or the system is working too hard. Um, when you when you do your labs, you'll if you're if you're doing a blood sugar glucose test, in a way that's going to help you because the number one cause of inflammation in the country is probably obesity and diabetes. So if your blood sugar is high, you got inflammation problems. If your A1C, which is the 3-month test that assesses you, if that's high and you want that to be 5.6 or less, even if it's borderline, it's a problem because 80% of borderlines will be progress on to diabetes. So you can look at the initial test and have a sense. If you do a cholesterol test, the most important test is not the cholesterol or the LDL cholesterol. It's probably the triglycerides, which are the fats, and the HDL, which is the so-called good cholesterol. Remember, H for healthy should be high, and L is the so-called bad cholesterol. L DL L should be low and it's lousy. But at the end of the day, the triglyceride to HDL ratio, when you divide those out, take the triglycerides and divide it by the HDL, that should be less than 2. If it's more than 2, you probably have inflammation. So you can just start with those tests, which are part of your typical panel that almost every doctor orders. Then you get into the more fancy tests that I mentioned earlier, like a C-reactive protein. That test is very important because it suggests chronic infections, metabolic syndrome, heart disease risk. You can get a test called the SET rate, erythrocyte SET rate. That's also a test that's really good to measure inflammation. There's a test that we think about with our iron, but it's called ferritin, but it's also known as a inflammatory marker if it's high. And you have more, homocysteine is another test that I order. And homocysteine is very important for inflammation as well. So I don't want to go too far. There's some fancy tests, tumor necrosis factor, but that's a little too much. So I'm just going to stick with those. And if you get these tests, and I think the average doctor will actually honor a C-reactive protein, a SET rate, things like that. Insulin level, they may not honor that because most doctors don't know how to read an insulin level. But if your insulin level is high, it means that your body is trying desperately to keep your blood sugar normal. And the reason why that test is probably the most important is because if it's high, what happens is that means that your body eventually is going to get a pancreas that's tired because it's working overtime to keep that insulin level high enough to keep your blood sugar normal. But that's the test as a reminder that if you do it now, it may predict diabetes 5 to 10 years in advance. If you do it now, it's 6.7 times more predictive of a future heart attack than your cholesterol or your LDL cholesterol. But we live in a world where every doctor focuses on cholesterol and LDL, yet we have this valuable test that's probably $50 that will predict it 5 to 10 years in advance. So if your doctor will not honor that request from a customer, which is what you are, which really frustrates me, then you may want to go to something like ownyourownlabs.com. And Own Your Own Labs will allow you to buy some of these tests on your own. But I would really encourage your doctor to work in partnership with you. And if you notice your insulin level is high, meaning I would say, they say the range is like, maybe from 2 to 28. But my goal is to get my patients to less than 10. So if it's like 23 or 30, and some people come in and it's like 100, now you have evidence that I need to spend my next year or 2 or 3 trying to reduce my inflammation so I won't wait until I'm having chest pain or symptoms of a stroke or cognitive decline, symptoms of dementia. So that's kind of how I would approach it. But you have to put your life in your hands because our system is really, there's a big delay between information like an insulin level and it being part of our standard of care. I mean, I knew about a calcium score test, which is a heart scan, years before our health system started offering it for $49. But we live in a world where insurance companies don't always want to pay for these things, so there's a delay, even though it's beneficial to everybody, including the insurance company. But if I pay for all these things, that's going to increase the cost of care for that insurance company. So we delay things, and people are leaving us prematurely because they didn't have this information. So it's really incumbent upon you to spend $50 for an insulin test that could then be the hook that'll hook you towards the lifestyle that you've been kind of delaying because you think you're okay. And maybe that warning would be enough to get you back on track.
Yeah, one of the things that I want to add, and this is real quick, that if you look at your lab report, basically they'll have 3 ranges for every test. It would be below normal, normal, or above normal. Anything below normal and above normal, you need to talk to your doctor about and try to understand why it is. You don't have to know what the test is or what the test does or what the test is supposed to do, but you can look at it, and if it's not normal, then that's something you need to talk to your doctor about it. Take it to your doctor when you see your doctor and ask, what does this mean? I see that my test here, this test was below normal. Does that mean I'm at risk of something? This test was abnormal. So a lot of people do have, because we have electronic medical records, a lot of people have access to their records, but they get these surprises when they walk in. The doctor says, well, you got a problem we got to deal with.
And they get the results when we get the results nowadays. Unless it's a specific type of test, they will get the results. So yeah, if you see, and your doctors are busy, so a doctor like myself may get 50 to 60 things in my in basket every day. So sometimes there's a delay. So if you see something that's concerning you, absolutely reach out to the doctor and have them act on it.
Wow, I want to say hey to Nellie Purnell King, who is here. She says hello to everybody. Sendell Scott is here, and she says hello. Alice Curry is here, and she says so true. Sister Bonnie is here, and she says hello to everyone. Dorothy Murphy is here, and she says hello. Jack Orloff is here. He says hello, Congressman Davis and team. Hey, Nikki. Hey, Jack, how are you? Of course, we got to Nellie Purnell's question, and Nellie Purnell is talking about the use of the My Chart. I want to say hey to Melinda Maxwell, who is here with us. And Melinda says, grand evening, my favorite people on my favorite channel. I thank you all so much for keeping us informed in True and in Health. I want to say hey to the guys over in the garage over there. Hey, guys. I know you guys are watching. Got to say hey to our team over at the Core Center. Cannot forget about our team at the Core Center. Well, we have a question from Instagram, and the question says, the foods that we eat, are there certain vegetables that can cause us to have inflammation, such as tomatoes?
Ooh, good question.
Yeah, I like that. I'll start this by saying there's a group of vegetables that are in a big category, and it's called nightshade. So I honestly had not heard of nightshades ever in my life until I went and got my master's in nutrition and functional medicine. So, but the irony is that, tomatoes is like at the top of the list. Potatoes are considered nightshades. Eggplants, peppers, those goji berries that some of us have consumed. Those are the ones that come to mind. Now, now people are really shocked when they see a doctor saying that they're a carnivore, right? It's crazy to imagine a doctor eats primarily meat. But the reason why I eat primarily meat is because I get irritated. My gut lining is extremely sensitive. Now, for those who don't have my problem, you should eat plants because I think plants are okay for people who are not impacted negatively. But this group of these nightshades, they actually irritate my gut. They're charry to my gut. The fiber doesn't help me; it actually hurts me. And you hear the term leaky gut is a term that you hear often. When you think about a leaky gut, and by the way, irritable bowel is an autoimmune disease. What happens to people like me is that the irritation then makes the channels that are supposed to protect you against large proteins that you shouldn't be absorbing, but they get absorbed. And if your body looks at that protein as something familiar, in other words, it may look like a part of your body that may then cause your body to attack not just the protein, but your body. And that's how you end up with things like lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. It's because of a leaky gut. I never learned that in medical school. I just didn't, which really bothers me that that's true. So for some people, the nightshades, as an example, are in the category. And for anybody watching, just Google nightshades to see what's in that category. That does not mean that's a problem for you. But as the question suggests, can it be a problem for some people? And the answer is yes. I just want to live in a world where my colleagues, my doctor colleagues in medical school, my future colleagues, let me say it that way, are taught this. So when people come to them and they have stomach problems, and the doctor says, I'm going to refer you to GI. And then they go see GI. They get scoped. We can't see anything. Everything's okay. And the patient thinks something wrong with them. The reality is there's nothing wrong with the patient. We just have a system that does not focus on the root cause of why we get sick. And we need to shift our training from diagnosing and treating to why do you have the problem in the first place? And in this case, rather it's this example, nightshades causing problems, or maybe I have a gluten sensitivity. Well, if the doctor's thinking about that, then they'll say, well, maybe you should avoid gluten, as opposed to just giving you a pill. So that's kind of the world we want to live in, but it's going to take time because we're not trained to think lifestyle or nutrition first. We're trained to think what pharmaceutical has been proven in clinical trials to solve this problem, which then leads to Band-Aid medicine. It's sick care. And that's why I'm so passionate about us changing that paradigm. It's going to be one doctor, one patient at a time, but that's the model that's better. So these types of questions are very helpful because it makes you think, how is it possible that plants, which is what I've been told to eat more than anything, can cause harm to some people? And if we don't know that, then we're in trouble.
Well, just to add to that,
What?
there are lots of things out there that are natural, but are not necessarily good for you.
Right.
Bee sting, wasp sting, poison ivy, natural occurring plants,
That's
but I don't
right.
think anybody would want to put them in a salad.
Right.
It helps for us to know what are the good choices, what are the choices that may not be helpful.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Wow. Excellent. Well, someone says, I thought tomatoes were a fruit. Well, that's been a debatable question for a long time. Is it a vegetable or is it a fruit? Is it a vegetable or is it a fruit? I think I was always told if it has seeds with an S, then it's a fruit. So that's always been a debatable question.
Yeah. It's a complicated. It's all about how you interpret it. But yes, as botanically speaking, it's a fruit. But in the practical world, because it's used in a culinary sense as a vegetable, people kind of lump it in that category. So it's really, if you want to be technical about it, it's absolutely a fruit. But at the end of the day, if it tastes good and I tolerate it, who cares?
Melinda says your gut affects your health. So, can removing your stomach eliminate a lot of issues? So, Melinda, I think you might need your stomach, but I'm gonna let one of the doctors answer that question.
So to answer the question,
Mm.
your digestive system is
Mm.
composed of many, many different portions. The stomach is really the first part that has acid that helps break down some of the proteins. But you also have a small intestine, which is really a long set of loops over and over and over again, where a lot of the absorption takes place. And then after that, you have the large intestine, where the stool is formed and it helps it get out of your body. You've also got the pancreas involved, which is where insulin comes from. It also includes some juices. And the gallbladder, which is part of the liver, which contains some juices too. So I think what would happen is if you took out your stomach, you would have some problems. And so people who don't have stomachs have what they call a dumping syndrome, because everything rushes through too quickly, doesn't get broken down, doesn't get absorbed very well, and that causes problems to the body. And I think what Dr. Hampton is talking about is there are certain things that could inflame or irritate all these different systems as you eat them, and they get broken down into your system. So we're trying to help you identify those things that are least likely to cause those problems, and those things that might help you absorb the food and help you absorb the right foods. So I don't think any of us are advocating, let's take out part of the system. We're looking at how to help the system and not overwhelm the system.
Yeah. And I do refer to gastric surgeons, or should I say bariatric surgeons. And it's funny, that's such a funny question, Nikki, because it's like, do you really need your stomach? And the reality is, as echoed with my colleague here, when people do gastric bypasses, you're kind of bypassing, you're reconnecting things, and you're bypassing the stomach. It's kind of crazy. The whole idea. Now, the problem with all of these surgeries and maybe not using the entire tube in the stomach is now you're going to be at risk for not absorbing nutrients, because when you take some of the plumbing out where you normally get absorption, you're going to basically not absorb the minerals and nutrients that you need. And it causes a lot of downstream negative effects. And one of the things I tell people, if I have somebody in front of me who's concerned about, we do DEXA scans, which is bone density tests, usually at 65 and up. And we're just trying to test to see if the bones are dense, right? So imagine a person who over years was not absorbing the proper nutrients to make their bones strong. That person will be at high risk for a hip fracture. What people don't know is that when people break their hip, their bones are so fragile. I think everybody thinks when you fall and break your hip, you're falling and breaking your hip. What you may be doing is breaking your hip and falling. I mean, you could be so fragile that you literally are at the counter in the kitchen, or washing dishes, and then you hear, and then you fall. So what came first, the chicken or the egg? You can get so fragile that you actually break your hip and then you fall. So we have to feed our body the nutrients it needs, which is why we, in many cases, would prefer you maintain your stomach and all the tubing that comes with it. But more importantly, if you have all of those tools in place for absorption, but you're still not feeding it properly, it may not matter. And by the time you get to the foods in the middle of the grocery store, you're going to find that the nutrients that were once in those foods are gone before they enter your mouth. Unless you get lucky and you get a cereal, for example, that was fortified with nutrients. And that will help, but it's not because those nutrients are synthetic or artificially made, they're not as good as the original. So even a fortified cereal is the equivalent of eating a Snickers bar and a multivitamin. So we have to be really careful about, again, eating things that are processed.
Yeah, I'm going to pick up on that and go back to where we started, is this issue of inflammation and how inflammation is a warning sign that the body sends to let you know that there's a problem. That doesn't always happen.
Right.
You don't get these warning signs all the time because one of the warning signs could be a heart attack.
Right.
You just to get the other messages earlier enough. There was the inflammation that was saying something is wrong and you got to take care of it, but it wasn't enough to get your attention to get you do something. If there's something that causes pain, or there's something that where you see blood, you're gonna seek help. But sometimes we don't pay attention, and there are no warning signs. What Dr. Hampton said is really pretty pertinent to this discussion, because we don't always get those warning signs. And you could be at the kitchen cleaning vegetables or whatever, and all of a sudden you fall down and you don't know why you fell down.
Mm.
It could be any number of things that happen. And that's why it's so important to get these tests, get regular examination, be in the care of a physician somewhere, because they will help you identify these things in advance so that you can take some action to mitigate them so you won't have these really severe outcomes.
Well, outstanding, and that's a great lead into what you guys don't want to hear me say, and that's our time. I know you hate when I say that, so we're going to go around and do our until next Monday. So many women are using waist. Oh, so Melinda asked one question. We'll take Melinda's last question. She says, so many women are using waist trainers and keeping them on so tight and for long periods of time. Is that safe? Beauty hurts. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tony. You were about to say something.
Yeah, I think, and I get it. Rather, it's to help out without surgery. A lot of people use these things having had surgery, and if you talk to the average person, they're being sold that your outcome will be better if you use it. But in my clinic, I'll see people having issues with rashes and irritation to the skin as a consequence. So, if you can tolerate it and it's not causing negative effects, and you may or may not get the outcome you're seeking, I think that's fair. But I think the bigger issue is the lifestyle is still the key, because rather you have surgery or you do this, you lose weight naturally. It's really the sustainable part is the lifestyle. How many people know people who have had even surgery and like 5 years later, they're right where they started? And if you watch somebody go through surgery, if you see somebody in my clinic go through surgery, it's kind of like being hit by a train. If you have a makeover, for example, it's like you got hit by a train. So it's a huge sacrifice where you literally would have to have another adult help you for the first few weeks, where you literally can't go up to your bed and lay flat for the first few weeks. But the easier sacrifice is to just go work with a trainer, spend some of that money for a trainer, spend some of that money on real food. And that's a more sustainable approach. And shout out to anybody that's ever done that or plans to do that. I'm not suggesting you don't. What I'm saying is understand fully what you're signing up for. And if you understand it, you may find that the sacrifice of lifestyle is way easier, way cheaper, without the risk that come with surgery. So even though I'm kind of going beyond the question, a lot of the people who are using these devices are people who have had surgery. That's why it kind of triggered me with that.
Yeah, and I just want to add, and this is real quick, it won't change your health profile or your risk profile, but it will make you look slimmer. That's all it
Yes.
does.
Yeah.
Doesn't change anything.
Right.
You're still the
Right.
same
You
person.
look better. Right. Maybe. Depending on
So
what
you
you
say
like.
your A1C3 is still up, huh?
Right. It may be higher because you're in so much pain. It's going to be higher for the first month or so because you're in pain. So yeah, of course.
Well, Doug, you're until next Monday.
So Nikki, I've been thinking about this, and during my career, what I depended the most on in my career was my car, because I had to drive back and forth to work in bumper to bumper traffic 6 days a week. You had to make sure that you put the right fuel in, the right octane. You had to take it in for its oil change regularly. You had to make sure that the radiator had the right fluid in it. And you had to make sure that the windshield wipers had the right stuff in it too.
Mm.
In order to get that best use of that car without breakdowns and to get you from here to there, that was kind of what I had to do. I think this discussion today is kind of the same thing. You got to have the right fuels for the engine. You got to make sure it's the right octane. You don't want to have something that's too rich in one thing and put taxes on the other part of the car. You want to make sure that the brakes will stop you in time. So there are lots of things that are requirements that we have to take care of to take care of our health, to see that we're going to get from here to there as long as we need to. So that's about my thought for until next Monday.
Yeah.
Take care of
Out-
yourself. You take care of your car.
Outstanding. Well, Joe, you're until next Monday. You're muted, Joe. You're still muted, Joe.
I apologize for that. Yeah,
It's
I'm,
okay.
I'm going to be brief. And I thought about this. I'm going to quote John 8:32, which tells us, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." We've tried to speak the truth today and speak truth to power to some degree, but the truth will set you free.
Yes.
All right. And that's what we want to be, and that is free. All right,
Mhm.
Dr. Hampton, you're until next Monday.
Mine's very simple as well. I just want to make sure we know what we fear. So when we hear that word inflammation, it is something that sounds like it's the enemy. But when I hurt myself, I welcome inflammation. If I have a little cut on my hand, I welcome inflammation. So inflammation is not the enemy. Um, it's an alarm system that's warning us. If it's acute, it's telling us, hey, something just happened and we need to fix it. If it's more chronic, it's a bigger alarm. It's alarm that we're on our way to poor metabolic health, meaning our risk for dementia, stroke, heart disease, future amputations, kidney failure, blindness, all those things are elevated if we live chronically inflamed. So my call to action for everybody on this call, if you were to remember one test to do, I'm going to go back to my fasting insulin. You go to your conventional doctor and say, listen, I heard this crazy doctor on Facebook with Danny Davis and Nikki and the rest of the crew talking about an insulin level. Would you do me the honor of providing that test for me? And if for any reason they won't, then you go to something like Own Your Own Labs so you can get your test yourself. And that way you'll know if you are at risk for chronic inflammation. Again, and this is the best way to know if you're going to have a heart attack in 5 to 10 years or diabetes in 5 to 10 years. I wish I had known that I'll be 30 years as a doctor this year. And if I had only known that, how many people could I have saved? So, but it's never too late to change. Just like Ernestine Shepherd, who started probably in her 60s or so to work out, and now she's one of the top elder bodybuilders in the world, you can achieve that as well. That's mine until next Monday.
All right. Well, Congressman, take us home.
Well, tremendous information. Wonderful, wonderful dialogue. My next Monday is actually a tribute to the fire captain who was killed in the accident.
Mm.
And it just happens that 5 members of my staff's families have been serviced by the captain's team. The fire station happens to be near my home. And when my wife broke her ankle, these gentlemen carried her down the stairs to get to the doctor. Sharita Logan's husband, they've cared. Jackie Greer's mother and Crystal Overton's husband. So all of us have a debt of gratitude to Captain and his teammates. And so we simply want to convey thanks, appreciation, and condolences to his family and the men and women who worked with him each and every day. I understand that his funeral services and wake and all of those things have been going on today and some still tomorrow. So, first offenders, people who serve others, I say are the salt of the earth. They are the pillars of the universe. They are the shoulders that the rest of society stands on and depend on. So, like physicians, law enforcement personnel, firemen, all of these are servants of humanity. And so we say thank you, Captain Meyer. And we say thank you to all of you who have continued to give of yourself in such a way that others benefit. So have a good night. And
Ashe.
until next Monday, we'll see you then.
Good night,
All
everybody.
right. Good night. Good night.